Yeshua Badeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagatiyatamashaki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Nigama Kapalurugaritam Padam Shukamakaramitta Dravisavitam Pivata Bhagatam Rashamarayam Mahora Shoki Bhaktir Bhavivakam Krishna Swadama Pagate Dhamakani Karonashta Drishamasha Paranako Dunodidam Om Maganati Mananda Sanganangana Sarakya Chaksurun Meditam Yanatashmai Shugiraveramha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Swayam Rupakaramyam Darati Swaparandikam Vandeham Sikarusyata Parakamanam Shikarun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagadadam Sagara Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Shah Namo Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namo Namaste Sarasati Deva Guruvani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunivari Praskata Desarharine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is Wisdom Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to share with you a preaching experience we had yesterday. Been invited to an elementary school here in Spanish Fork, 2.9 miles away exactly, according to Google Maps. East Meadows Elementary. Never been there before. And it's unusual that schools invite us to come nowadays because the experience of coming to the temple and working with the llamas and the parrots and having an immersive spirit experience, more often than not, eating lunch in the temple. Teachers have found that to be much more effective. So it's rare that we get invited to go out to schools these days. Rather, the reverse is more the norm. But recently I had 3 inquiries from elementary school teachers right here in Spanish Fork to go to their schools, or in one case to do a Zoom call. And this lady was McKenna Bennett from East Meadow. We've never been there before, as I said. So they'd put aside what they call the little theater, kind of a amphitheater type place, very congenial. They had a slide projector. I brought a slide show. They eventually figured out how to project it. And there were quite a few kids, second graders. Sometimes we make the presumption that second graders aren't very intellectually mature, developed, and can't ask good questions. My experience is exactly the opposite. I think when they get to middle school and high school, they get so many inhibitions. They're so much aware of the peers. They're scared to death of asking a question for fear that one or another of their peers would ridicule them. So they really sold out as far as honest, sincere, open-hearted inquiry is concerned. But none of that taint has downloaded into the minds of second graders. And so I found that it's much easier to coax questions out of second graders, and the questions are actually much better than the guarded questions that the junior high schools and senior high schoolers give. It's a shame that over the course of by advancing from lower to higher grades, they actually become less inquisitive, less passionate about learning than they were when they started out. Probably says schools can be slaughterhouses in that sense. In any case, there were about 60 second graders. It was funny because, as I showed you yesterday, I lost a tooth a couple days ago, and I was a little embarrassed about appearing in public with this big gap in my mouth. But my unease was put to rest right away when I looked out at my audience. First time they smiled, and I saw that they all had missing teeth. Every single one of them had. I think the average was about 3. Some of them had 5 missing teeth, some of them had 1. But I would say on the average, every one of those second graders was missing about 3 teeth. So I felt right at home. And we all had a good laugh about all our respective missing teeth. I opened it up for questions, and we started with a bang. They'd studied a little bit about quote unquote Hinduism. So the first question, this little boy on the front row, he says, "Do you have 15,000 gods?" And I said, no, we have 33 million. And you could hear from the whole, whoa, the whole. I think their expectation was me to brush 15,000 figure under the rug. But I did the unexpected and I multiplied it thousands of times over. And I was quick to explain that there's only one God, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigrahana Dhira Govinda Savarakarana. Lord Brahma himself, the creator of this universe, declares that his Lord is Krishna. Our Brahma traces his origins back to Krishna, and in fact tells us that all Brahmas, all the creators of all the various universes, they're all emanating from one singular source, which is the form and personality of Krishna, as are all the Vishnus and the Shivas. So I asked the kids, I said, if you're God, if you could do anything, what would be the first thing you did as far as your creation was concerned? What would be the first thing? If there was no limits, if you could do anything you wanted, what would be the first thing you do? And the answer is that you would expand yourself. So you would make such an arrangement that you personally in your original primeval form would have nothing to do. You'd get up every morning, so to speak, and there would be no duty prescribed for you to perform. Just the opposite. You prescribe the duties from everyone else by creating universes which have to be organized, which have to be managed, which have to roll along according to precision, timing, and scheduling. You create out of yourself the Brahmas to create the universes, the Vishnus to preserve the universes, and the Shivas to destroy the universes. The end result of which is that you, as the supreme, omnipotent, living being, have nothing prescribed for you to do. That's why Shiva's working, dancing in his ring of fire, doing yoga, destroying universes. Vishnu is entering in each atom, entering the heart of living. Can you imagine the computations that Vishnu has to do every fraction of a second to give every living being the just results of all of his karmic decisions throughout this and all the past lives? Can you talk about a supercomputer? Oh my gosh. But Vishnu does that. He's an all-powerful expansion of the all-powerful Lord. But the Lord expands himself, and each expansion is specific to the tasks with which it is charged. So Lord Vishnu is charged with the task of preserving. Now, creation is a one and done thing. Destruction is a one and done thing, but preserving involves just unlimited gazillion, quadrillion calculations every second to take into consideration the past history of every single tiny infinitesimal spirit soul and moving it from the last second, moving into the second exactly judiciously. People generally think that creator is the greatest role. Not at all, not even close. The role of preserver there's an immense amount of balancing, compensating, reconciling, justifying that's needed to be done every single moment. And that's Vishnu. It's a huge task, just stunning, stunning. If an ordinary person was charged with 1 gazillionth of what Vishnu does every moment, their mind would explode. Their mind would turn to jelly. They would go running off into the sunset, screaming like a madman. There was that funny scene from, what was it? God. Jim Carrey was playing God. He was given the role of God. God let him be God. So before he went, so all the requests, everything that people wanted, and this isn't what they deserved. What they deserve is a much more sophisticated process of calculating than what they want. What they want is just animal gratification, just stimulation for the tongue and the eyes and the mouth. So what their desires are and what they want is very base very gross, very limited, very defined. What they deserve is that's a whole nother level altogether. So in any case, as incoming emails, once Jim Carrey, I think it's called Almighty Bruce, was given the role of God, every one of the base animalistic desires that people had came to him as emails in his inbox. So he started out by typing each answer with 2 fingers and his tongue singing. And there's like millions and millions of base animalistic low-class requests coming in. Finally, he figured a way to just type 1 yes and hit it, and it goes back to everybody. So having solved that technical problem, and he put it on auto. So any incoming request, just yes, yes, yes. No, he went to sleep. He woke up in the morning to the sounds of fire crackling, sledgehammers banging, glass breaking, metal crumping, people screaming. And he dragged himself out of bed and went to the window. He opened the window and he called to the nearest rioter down on the street. He said, "What's everyone so upset about?" The guy turns up to him and says, "I won the lottery, but I only won 15 cents," because everybody had won the lottery. So our point is twofold. One is that the job of Vishnu is much greater than the job of Brahma and Shiva. Vishnu is that expansion of Krishna who is really above and beyond any other god capable of doing the immense computations and calculations to maintain millions and millions of universes. But Krishna, the supreme God, who has no limits on himself, his mechanism for keeping the heat off of him, for taking the weight off of his back, is to expand himself into millions of Vishnu forms. And I told the kids, think of a candle. One candle can light 10 other candles. And each one of those candles, then having been lit, is just as powerful as the first candle. By the same token, one candle can light 100 candles, can light 1,000 candles, and all those subsequent lit candles are powerful. So from Krishna comes unlimited Vishnus. And each Vishnu, as far as his own sovereign area or his own universe is concerned, does these unbelievably complicated calculations at every moment and keeps things going. In other words, Vishnu conforms more to what we think of God than Krishna. If you think of God as a manager, the one who's responsible for the seasons to change, the sun and moon to rise and set, and everything to go on precisely, that's Vishnu. Why Vishnu? Because Krishna takes advantage of God's prerogative to not be obliged to do anything. Whereas Vishnu basically does everything, including Brahma and Shiva come from Vishnu. Having expanded himself into Vishnu, then Vishnu expands himself and produces Brahma and Shiva. So what does this all tell us? That God has nothing to do. When you find that personality who, unique amongst all created living beings, including Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, and others, has nothing to do with player's flute, that's God. That's the supremely powerful. Now, even though he has no duties prescribed, does that mean he's inactive? Does not. He acts out of his own sweet will, prioritizing the purpose for which God lives and the purpose for which he created us. God lives for love. The highest part of any living being, the most noble part, is connected with love. The love of a mother for her child, the love of parents for their children, the love of a proper leader for his citizens, the love of a master for their pet, the love of the pet for the master. Love is the best part of us. God is all about love, ultimately. Of course, management has to be there, but love is more important. It's like if you're a father and a husband. As the father, you have to go out and earn a living. You have to go to the office. And at the office, you have various business relationships with the people who work there. You might be an employer, you might be an employee. But there's one level of relationships in the office. And you have to do that. As a father, you have to earn, put a roof over the heads of your family and food on the table. But the best you is not at the office, the best you is at home. The best you is at home, where you're engaged in warm, intimate relationships with your family members. Now, if you're God, if you're Krishna, you don't have to earn a living. You don't have to go to the office. You can just expand yourself. And Vishnu is that God at the office who is expert at managing. You know, management skills require leadership. They require a sense of humor. They require a sense of humility. The best leaders are those who are also servants. There are many, many thousands of books written about leadership skills. Now, Krishna is not so much a leader in terms of management, but he sets the standard in terms of love. And really, when you see Krishna playing his flute, that should tell you everything you need to know about Krishna being all-powerful and supreme. He has no duties which he is obliged to perform because there's no one above him. He's above everyone, no one's above him. Ekala Isha Krishna Adisabha said, there's one supreme Lord, and his name is Krishna, and all others, including Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are his servants. So how are we then to understand this all-powerful supreme Lord who plays on his flute? How many of us even want to? How many of us would even identify that as a priority in our lives? Our priorities are far different from wanting to reawaken our connection with the all-powerful Lord, who is our well-wishing friend. Unfortunately, we're so short-sighted, we're so misled, we're so in the dark that we can't even identify what is in our best interest. So how are we ever going to achieve that state of self-realization where we're once again protected within the bosom, within the embrace of our powerful Lord? And the answer is we're not. We're not on course for that. We're not anywhere near that goal. We're not, you know, when you were kids, and one kid would hide something, and then the other kids would look for it, and the kid who knew where the item was, where the hidden item was, would kind of guide the searching kids by saying, "You're cold." Or if they would come a little closer, if they would turn in the direction where the thing was hidden, they say, "You're getting warm, you're warmer, you're warmer. Oh, now you're colder, you're colder, colder, you're warm, and then say you're hot, you're hot, you're hot." So we're not warm, we're not hot. As far as the goal of life, the purpose for which we're created, we're not warm, we're not hot, we're not even cold. We are Arctic. We have no clue. We are as far away from any scintilla of love of God as one could possibly be. We are swimming in ignorance. We are submerged in the ocean of nescience, as Prabhupada said it. So how are we going to understand the Lord? How are we going to fulfill the mission of human life and make our life successful? We're not. We're not. We have no clue. If someone asks me, who is your great-great-great-great-grandfather? I couldn't tell them because I had no experience with that person. That person existed before I saw the light of day. So similarly, how are we to know what to speak of, identify, what to speak of, awaken our dormant God consciousness and re-engage in his service? We have no experience in this life. So it's impossible for us to do anything by which our love of God is awakened. However, Krishna is that personality who makes the impossible possible. It is impossible for the finite living being overwhelmed in this ocean of earth, air, fire, water, mind, intelligence, and false ego, separated since thousands and thousands of lifetimes from the Lord, to totally unused to, totally out of any habit of doing devotional service. All kinds of bad self-destructive habits have replaced what might have been the tendency towards devotional service. So how does that finite living being caught in time and space, buried between layers and layers and layers and layers of earth, air, fire, and water. How does that soul understand the infinite, unlimited, supreme spiritual personality of Godhead? Doesn't. There isn't any way. But God, again, makes the impossible possible. The finite cannot understand the infinite, but the infinite can make himself accessible to the finite. After all, he has all potencies, including the potency to reveal himself to the finite. I remember I heard a sermon. I was actually just searching for it on YouTube. I couldn't find it, but I'll try afterwards to see if I can. It was a black preacher. I think his name was Calvin. And he gave one of the greatest, most inspiring sermons of all time. He grew up in Mississippi as a little boy in Mississippi. And he asks a number of questions. Does the greatness of God consist in him bringing light out of dark? And he talks about the magnificence, the mystic powers by which God brings light out of dark. He says, no, that's not his greatest power. Then he says, this is the greatest power to speak worlds into existence. And he talks extensively about how when God speaks, he's so powerful that when he speaks, what he speaks becomes instantaneously a fact. We speak something, and it might be months or years before it comes to pass. There's so much of a lapse of time. There's so much that comes against us. We may never even accomplish what we speak. Maybe I would venture to say 95% of what we promise we never are. We never jockey ourselves into a position to come through with that promise. So our speaking is mostly useless, mostly just hot air. But God speaks worlds into existence. And he asks, is that the greatest power of God, that he speaks and worlds come to existence? He elaborates on it and he says, no, that's not the greatest power. And then he says, having spoken worlds into existence, is it the greatest power of God? That everything is precisely aligned and systematically running with precision. Everything with unbelievable precision is going on. Is that the greatest power of God? And he says, no, that's not the greatest power of God. Then he talks about how God populates the world, creates millions and millions of species in all different forms and genders and categories, from the beetle, from the aquatics, to the insects, to the trees, to the plants, to the reptiles, to the birds, to the human beings, to the demigods. He creates unbelievably mind-boggling varieties of living beings, and he provides for them. He gives them the raw materials by which they can have shelter and food and transportation. He says, is that the greatest manifestation of God's power? And he says, no, that's not the greatest manifestation of God's power. And then he goes back. I'll try and find this sermon for you and play excerpts in the future. And then he goes back and he says, what is the greatest, the absolute greatest, above and beyond manifestation of God's power? And he says, a 12-year-old boy, a little barefoot Afro-American boy, descendant of slaves, generations of slaves, hijacked from Africa, brought to be tyrannized and exploited, killed, beaten, imprisoned, lynched by the dominant culture. This son, generations removed from those people who were displaced, little 12-year-old boy, hardly educated, grown up in a shack, the rural areas of Mississippi, separated from the whites in a segregated area, viewed as a substandard, as subhuman, basically, denied essential rights. That 12-year-old boy is walking along a forest path, barefoot on the dirt in Mississippi. And all of a sudden, he gets a bolt from within his heart. There is a God. He has created me. I am here for a greater purpose, and I'm going to move heaven or I'm going to do whatever it takes to find that purpose and step into the middle of that purpose. So that is the greatest manifestation of God's power. that he could extend himself down to the humblest, lowest born, least privileged, least entitled, and touch that young person's heart in such a way as to elevate him, as to inspire him to excavate the greatest part of life, the, 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 the identity for which he's seen the light of day, been put on this earth, and guide his footsteps, illuminate his path so that everything becomes clear. His position, God's position, the purpose for which he's been here, and the life's mission. And here's this man from such humble origins, having been touched by the mercy of God, the inexplicable, what we call the causeless mercy of God at a young age. And here he is now standing on a pulpit, sharing his knowledge with hundreds and through media, thousands and thousands of people. He said, this is the greatest manifestation of God's power. It is, in fact, his mercy. Shakespeare put it in The Merchant of Venice. See if I can remember. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as a gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his scepter. The quality of mercy is the greatest power of which God is capable. And so although it's impossible for us to understand God, he makes the impossible possible by extending his mercy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Nam name kara bhavne jasarva shakti shatapitani metatrin shmarana katadushi tava kripam bhagavandadapi durdayami dushami ajani nanaragaham. Lord, you're so kind that you've invested all of your potencies, including your greatest potency, your mercy potency. You have invested all of your potencies, foremost of which is your mercy potency. Where? Where is it to be found? Where is it to be discovered? Let me go. Let me get it. Let me grab onto it. Let me auction whatever I have. If it's a matter of pawning all of my wealth and all of my influence in order to get God's mercy in its most potent form, tell me what I must do. Where must I go? Lord Chaitanya not only describes how God's mercy, all of his potencies, are invested within his holy names. Nam, Nam. Nam is the Bengali Sanskrit word from which you get name. What's the answer to the question? Wherein lies God's greatest potency? In his name. Nama Chintamani Krishna Te Chandara Purna Sudha Mitman Bina Bam Nami Namina. The name of the Lord, any bona fide name. We use the name Krishna because it's the most comprehensive. But there are many names of God. There's no bar to using any and all of them. But we chant Hare Krishna because in this name of God are invested all of God's potencies. There are not even any hard and fast rules for chanting the holy names of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reveals to us that God's mercy is available, is fully present in his mercy incarnation through the name. But Lord Chaitanya doesn't leave it there. He doesn't leave it there. He personally comes and dedicates 48 years walking to and fro on the planet, manifesting, personifying the practice for invoking God's mercy in this age of Kali Yuga. Wherever Lord Chaitanya went, he had one business, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He never even wrote books. He just chanted. He just chanted. And if he's attributed to writing something, there are 8 verses which are said to be the only literary output of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what's the subject matter? Chanting. To paraphrase Lord Chaitanya's 8 verses on the chanting of the holy name, Shiksha Astakam. 8, Ashtaka means 8, Shiksha means instructional. So there are 8 instructional verses, which are said to be the only literary output of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chanting the holy names cleanses the heart, extinguishes the flames, breaks the chains. Blessed is the earth at large, as moonlight rays, discharging waves of nectar our sense has been craving since ancient days. The holy names put all other blessings to shame. Krishna Govinda chanted anywhere, everywhere. The mercy Shakti is fully there. Divine app to restore your mental software, zap the malware, restart your heart, tap the reservoir of loving care. No hard and fast rules, no lessons, no schools. The bliss of bhakti rare, yet free for the taking. Only to declare your heart is aching in divine love awakening. Night and day by constant recitation, chant the great mantra without hesitation, free from temptation with the sensation of feeling yourself lower in the straw in the street, more tolerant, three, devoid of all sense of false prestige. Humility is the key to enjoy the vibration eternally. Wealth in the millions, beautiful women, the spell of fame, worldly acclaim. Hey, even liberation, totally lame compared to the champagne of chanting the holy names. Krishna Govinda, though you're the one, second and none, my shining sun. I'm heartbroken in the ocean of birth and death. It's not worth the commotion. Pull me out of this cruel blender. Surrenders an atom in the sweet splendor of your tender lotus feet. Lord, when will my eyes pour tears of love like rain from the skies above? When will my voice choke up invoking your name? When in transcendence my body hairs stand an end? Though a moment appears like 12 years or more when you're not here, I'll only proclaim your name and I'm smiling again. Even if you restrain me, roughen your embrace, or pain me by hiding your face, you remain my Lord unconditionally. No matter what the difficulty, decline or gain, rain or shine, I am yours and you are mine. Lord Brahma himself, you'd think that if anybody was qualified, had the intellect, the yogic background, the pious accumulation of credits, if anybody could reach God on their own power, it would be Brahma, who created this universe. And I think you'll agree with me that creating a universe is no small feat. And yet, Lord Brahma made this declaration in the 10th canto, 14th verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tapi te deva parambuja prasada lashana ganiya, janati tadvam bhagavan mahimo, nachanyo eko picharan vichinvan. Mahimo means God is great. How can the ant crawling in your arm understand you? How is that possible? You're so complex. You have so many more intellectual and physical powers than the little humble ant. He cannot understand you. But if you could come into the ant's language and come into the ant's orbit, you might be able to explain something about yourself to the ant. Otherwise, the ant can't understand you. So are you saying true Brahma's like an ant? Well, yeah, relatively speaking, he is. In fact, Brahma describes himself as a maidservant of Krishna. Brahma says that if I could swap my supreme position as Lord of this particular universe in order to become a blade of grass in the eternal spiritual world that Krishna sometimes walks upon with his lotus feet, I would switch even for a minute. Compared to the other Brahmas, each and every one of which creates and presides over different unlimited universes, Brahma says, I am like a mosquito amongst elephants. I am like a mosquito amongst elephants. So this Brahma, who is the most qualified living being within our universe, and is on a par with all other Brahmas who have created other universes universally, he says, Atapi te deva padambujan. There's no way that I can understand God. His powers are inconceivable, far beyond the ability of my intellect to comprehend it. But God is such that he can enter into my sphere of consciousness and explain himself so far as I can understand. Nobody can understand God fully, not even God himself. But so far, what is needed to spark our faith, to fan the flames, God can impart that to us. And he doesn't do it directly, necessarily. Of course, there's that small, silent voice in the heart that illuminates our footsteps and helps us make better decisions. But the best decision that God from within the heart is going to inspire us to make is the decision to seek out, or having come across by the grace of God, by the mercy of God, a bona fide devotee of the Lord, a saint, an acharya. The availability in your life of a bona fide spiritual master is, in fact, the greatest manifestation of God's potencies. greater than creating millions of worlds, greater than maintaining millions of worlds, greater than producing unlimited varieties of living being, greater than providing for them, greater than enacting the precision, greater than creating out of your own energies, Vishnus and Brahmas and Shivas, greater than all of that is that you send to the lost, fallen souls in this dark material world your representatives in the form of the spiritual masters to give the lost the life raft they need, the lifeboat, the inner tube to get extrication from this material world. Brahmanda Bromite Kono Bhagavana Jiva Guru Krishna Pashade Pai Bhakti Latabish says when one tiny infinitesimal spiritual spark becomes overwhelmed with bewilderment and suffering and miseries and the repetition of birth, death, disease, and all, when he comes to the end of his ability to continue to pursue that with any sort of zeal or enthusiasm, he calls out to the Lord, Lord, give me the answers. Give me the direction. And it is said, if you seek, you shall find. So when we ask the right questions with the right level of intensity, God never fails us. He'll always send us a bona fide representative. Prahlad Maharaj, a good example of such a savior of which we were talking about, he says, I see the sages blazing with their ascetic engagements, seeking their own salvation. But they close their eyes, they turn their backs on the materially attached. But as for me, my heart aches for those who are lost and misled. Not knowing Krishna's love, their hearts are cold. They'll never true happiness, they'll never behold. Says, I can't seek my liberation alone, leaving the fools and rascals behind. They're very much on my mind. So I won't seek liberation alone. I will bring them back to your lotus throne. Prahlad Maharaj is that mercy manifestation of the Lord, foregoing his own salvation, remaining in this material world for the sake of those who are suffering Maya Sukhaya, false happiness in this material world. Here's a nice example. A small child cannot climb up on the shoulders of its father. If the child wants to sit up on the high, elevated shoulders of his father, it's not possible. He can't climb up there. But if the child indicates its willingness, its eagerness, if it identifies, that's where I want to be. And then he communicates. Maybe he doesn't speak well. Maybe he's a late developer. Maybe he's too young to be able to form the proper words. But still he can indicate through his language by jumping up, arms in the air, that he wants to go up on the shoulders of the Father. However, he's incapable of doing it on his own. But if he communicates with heartfelt sincerity to the Father, maybe it's even nonverbal communication, however he's able to exert himself. If there's a fire and people in that burning building are Ukrainian, or they speak Russian, or they speak Ukrainian, you don't speak their language, you can still go into that building, and by your gestures and by your intensity, you can still alert them to the danger and bring them to safety, even if you don't speak their language. So similarly, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, the child who sincerely and heartfeltly wants to sit on his father's shoulders can communicate that. And it's not like the father's oblivious, indifferent, remote, uncaring. Father actually would like nothing better than for the child to sit on his shoulders. The father's been hoping for this, dreaming about this for a long, long time, but he was just waiting for the child to indicate its readiness and its willingness. And at such time as the child starts jumping and gesturing and indicating that he would like to sit on the shoulders of the father's not going to make that offer available. However, as soon as the father sees the sincerity of the child, then he stoops down. He comes down to the son's level And he himself puts the child on his shoulders, and then he rises to his full height. Vairagya vidinija bhaktim shichartameka parusha shikisha chaitanya sara kripambharyastra mahamjate. That supreme, unattainable, unreachable, inconceivably powerful Supreme Personality of God, from whom come 33 million demigods. And they come from an expansion of Vishnu. That Supreme Personality of Godhead has been waiting, longing, hankering for us to take shelter, to appeal to him, to take us up on his shoulders. Since lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, he's followed us when we've been an aquatic, when we've been a bird, we've been a mammal, we've been a demigod, we've been a human being. For who knows how many lifetimes he's stuck with us. He's stuck with us. And he hasn't been in the least bit interested in our petty animalistic pursuit of sense gratification. As far from God's point of view, that girl we want to couple with, that land we want to buy, that building we want to start, that family we want to produce. As far as God's concerned, he's just with us as a witness, but I mean, he doesn't see that as in our best interests. He'll give us rope, he'll give us the freedom to make our decisions and pursue our temporary goals of sense gratification, and he basically is not interested in that for us at all. He's basically stifling yawns lifetime after lifetime of life. But what is it that's going to so-called bring God to life? What is it that's going to get his attention when we reach out to him? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Ram. He's in our heart. He knows our consciousness. So when our consciousness is turned away from him, he stays. He doesn't abandon us. But he's just, I mean, it's kind of like there isn't anything for him to do. He's just marking time. God's bored, you might say, in your heart. You know, you've created a situation which is incompatible for God. You haven't expressed any interest. You haven't welcomed him. You haven't cleaned up your heart. You haven't even made a nice place for God to sit. There's all kinds of dirty, crappy things in there. You have not only, not reached out for God, but you've done everything you could to make your heart an inhospitable place. And yet God has not abandoned you. He's stuck the course in spite of your indifference and even your filthiness. He's still with you. But what is it you do that can catch his interest? What is he waiting for you to do? Poised, hankering for you to do. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. As soon as you turn to him, so to speak, by indicating interest in accessing his mercy through his holy names, God immediately, he's like comes to life, so to speak. He's like, this is what I've been waiting for. Just like the father, for a long time, he's wanted to take the child in his shoulders, but the child hasn't expressed any interest. And when the child initially, after a long time, expresses interest, the father, that's what he's been waiting for. So Kono Bhagavana Jiva Guru Krishna Prasadi, after wandering in many species of life throughout the higher, lower, and middle planetary system for who knows how long, when one finally wants to solve the problems of birth, death, disease, and old age, step back into that purpose for which you've created, fold oneself within the loving embrace of the Lord, do his will in this world. When we finally indicate all that to him by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Rama, we can't imagine how much pleasure that gives Krishna, how quickly he steps into the breach and guides our footsteps back to home, back to God. He's so eager that he came all the way from the spiritual world. Krishna came to us as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He appeared amongst us as a human being. He chanted constantly for most of the 48 years of his life. He preached, he made disciples, he fortified, strengthened, reinforced the disciplic succession extending back from the time of Lord Krishna through Madhvacharya. And most importantly, he did what he wants us to do. He didn't just give us theory and say, you do this. You don't do as I do, but do as I say. No, he said, do as I do. His life was an exemplary life of devotion. And if we take up the call, accept his invitation, and follow in his footsteps, you will go back to home, back to Godhead. You will go back to home, back. That's a promise directly from the lips of the one who created Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Lord, from whose original form 33 million demigods occurred. From that person who said, let there be light, and there was light. That person who spoke worlds into existence. That person from whom millions and millions of species of life come. That person who provides for the maintenance, all the basic needs of those million. That person is waiting for you to show interest in going back to home, back to Godhead, where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. And when you show sincere interest in that destination, he will move heaven and hell to get you to where you're supposed to be. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. So thanks for jumping on with us today on Wisdom Wednesday. Rob's indicated he's going to be in his car, so he doesn't have a contribution today to make. But thanks for being with us and commenting. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranama, Glories to Srila Prabhupada Lilavati. Thanks for some nice smiley faces with hearts from Bhavi. And Brent, in the second grade, you aren't afraid. But when you become a teen, you get worried about how you'll be seen. You got to inquire without worrying about your pride if you expect your answers from the bona fide. Oh, I love that. I love that. I hope you're indexing all of these someplace. In the second grade, you aren't afraid, but when you become a teen, you get worried about how you'll be seen. You got to inquire without worrying about your pride if you expect answers from the bona fide. Oh gosh, that's so good. And Lilavati says of your poem, Brent, amazing, as do I. I concur. Sundari Priya says, Hare Krishna, please excel. Glories to Prabhupada. Lilavati has a shorter rhyme here. We have no clue what to do. Thank Krishna for Vishnu. We have no clue what to do. Thank Krishna for Vishnu. Here's another from Brent. You can tell Krishna is powerful because he has nothing to do except to have loving relationships with me and you. He has the advantage that his expansions manage while he plays his flute and enjoys our work's fruit. Nice. You can tell Krishna is powerful because he has nothing to do except to have loving relationships with me and you. He has the advantage that his expansions manage while he plays his flute and enjoys your work's fruit. Bhavi says, God is bored in your heart putting up with all the dirt. Yeah, there's kind of a hint of a rhyme there. God is bored in your heart putting up with all the dirt. And here's a third output from Brent. This is the second day in a row. He's come up with 3 rhymes in response to our discussion. The greatest mercy of God is that he sends us a spiritual master to help us escape this material disaster. God yawns at what we say we desire, but he hankers for us to plead for something higher. Very nice. The greatest mercy of God is that he sends us a spiritual master to help us escape this material disaster. God yawns at what we say we desire, but he hankers for us to plead for something higher. Thank you very much. Brent, Bhavi, Lilavati, all of those. Thanks for listening on the road. And we're not many, but we're fired up. I will say that. We're tapping our God-given creative powers, and one can't ask for more than that. So this has been Wisdom Wednesday. We'll have a hiatus until next Monday. So in the meantime, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.